Hey there! We're not dead, but we sort of missed the window for Starfire. It really doesn't seem like she's that popular though, so what do you guys think? Anyways, here's Black Manta. Black Manta doesn't have anything to force your opponent into a defensive state, but he makes up for it by having a great mid-range attack that gets him in close to apply pressure. And his close-range pressure is overwhelming if done correctly thanks to his flight canceling, which also happens to be one of the most difficult strategies to execute since you can't buffer anything. Jumping humans isn't really a problem since mid-range missiles keep the skies clear as well as hindering forward normal movement with relative safety. His special wake-up isn't really that good since your invulnerability runs out a few frames before the impact, not to mention that you can't combo off of it and you're full combo punishable on block. Great forward and back dashes, as well as the ability to fly and a full screen dash special, give him an above average rating in the movement department. Black Manta's teleport punch is a decent punisher in the long range. It'll definitely get people to be a bit more conservative with their projectile usage, and forward 2 is great for mid-range punishes. Reactionary players will feel right at home with Black Manta, especially with his close range meta. Black Manta's laser special is a short-range beam that hits 4 times and knocks back if meter burned. Full combo punishable on block, so make sure that you have a bar of meter for safety if you're going to use this outside of combos. The primary use of this special is to end your close-range pressure when your trade isn't available. It builds almost 30% of a bar and chips for about 5 to 6%. The popular opinion is that your meta revolves around this. I believe it's more of a backup option. Like always, we'll go into detail later in the video. Back forward 2 sends Black Manta across the screen for a strike that leads to a knockdown. Meter burning causes more damage and an unwanted pushback after the impact. An interesting note is that if done in the air, you shave off 10 frames of startup animation. And seeing as the hitbox is very generous, you can punish jumped projectiles from a long distance if timed correctly. This is a classic case of easier said than done. But, you know, practice and all that stuff. Down back 2 shoots an upward missile that tracks to your opponent briefly before exploding. Meter burning shoots a second long-range missile that bounces, leading to a full combo. Alright, so the first thing you have to know is that the initial missile hits high, so that means no cancelled strings into missile pressure if your opponent knows this. The second thing you need to know is that if you get hit before the missile explodes, it will do its best to avoid your opponent. If the interrupt is too late, you'll exchange hits despite the missile's attempt. Even though you're plus 18 on hit, you cannot combo after a meterless grounded missile because of the NRS combo system. However, the airborne missile acts like a jump-in, allowing a combo after landing. Just keep in mind that it's still a high attack despite what it may look like, so be careful with the jumping 2 cancels. Black Manta's teleport punch is your long-range projectile punisher that leads to a combo if meter burned. Highly punishable on block, even when meter burned, since the laser can be interrupted. However, novice opponents may drop the combo if they're assuming you'll be grounded. Remember that aside from a perfectly spaced back forward 2, this is your only tool against full screen death, so don't be afraid to use it. If your opponent is showing signs of respect, take advantage of it and dash into the mid-range for free. There's no need to use the teleport punch if your opponent is already scared and waiting for it. The Harpoon is a full screen projectile that puts your opponent behind you on hit. Meter burning adds damage. Despite the fact it's a full screen projectile, it's not good for ranged battles because if you're hit, you won't follow through with the attack. There's no reason to use this on the ground either. On hit, you throw your opponent across the stage, which isn't what you want, seeing as you have no decent projectiles for the distance game. It does less damage than his other specials too. The air, however, is a different story. The Harpoon is your strongest special finisher, and it drags them closer to you with enough advantage to apply wake-up pressure. Black Manta's trait allows him to fly for a short duration. The ability to fly isn't useful, but the fact that you can cancel attacks into your flight opens up a lot of combo extensions in pressure games. There will be a whole section dedicated to this later in the video, so let's just look over the facts for now. You can cancel out of grounded normals as well as jumping normals. About 15% of meter is required for the initial flight and about 20% for each additional activation before you land. Attacking while flying also eats about 20% of your bar per attack. If you don't have enough meter, you will be unable to attack. You'll be forced to land when your meter is fully depleted. You may also choose to manually land by pushing the switch stance button. Manually landing counts as a special move, thus you are able to cancel airborne attacks with it to extend combos or pressure. The meter expenditure naturally keeps the combos tame, however NRS doesn't want you to combo after a second flight jump in. There's also a few bugs, seeing as you can activate for free after landing really quickly, which happens to be totally useless. And you can combo 2 flight attacks together by trying to cancel after the impact. I haven't quite figured out the timing for it, but it's not like it matters. Flight attacks scale more than regular jumping attacks, thus the diminishing returns would render any combo utilizing this pointless. We'll revisit this later in the video. I mean, it's his metagame after all. That's right, I said it. Screw the lasers. Before going into the details, here's an overview of what attacks you'd want to be thinking about and their ranges. In the long-range neutral, you have 2 main options. The first being the obvious choice, the teleport punch. Leading to a full combo on hit, it'll make anyone think twice about mindlessly throwing projectiles at you. The downside to it is that you have to teleport more on anticipation, since you can get hit out of your startup frames easily. While this will destroy novice players who have no concept of punishment, better opponents will be a bit more cautious and random with their projectiles, making it extremely risky teleporting on them. Generally speaking, the best time to use the teleport is when you just entered the long range, usually by a knockback or combo, because a lot of people's instinct is to throw a projectile upon entering the long range neutral. If you're in the long range neutral for more than a few seconds, a smart opponent is already thinking about your teleport punch, so it's better to be extremely conservative with its usage. But that's okay, there's a better option when you're in this situation. That is, if you have the chops for it. Enter back forward 2, and seemingly mindless jumping. Okay, hear me out. Instead of teleporting on anticipation, jump on anticipation. If your gut feeling was correct and your opponent threw something at you, use a well-placed shark attack to punish their attack. This works because back forward 2 only has a 5-frame startup when airborne, and travels at max speed from the start. Now factor in the generous hitbox and you're ready to sail above a projectile, snag your opponent for some damage, and gain entry into the close range advantage since post-shark attack wake up is in your favor. The beauty of this is that if your opponent did nothing, well, no big deal. You just jumped at long range, and nobody is going to be able to do anything about it. Except ironically, Black Manta himself. If your timing was bad and it looks like you might land on something, you can just activate your trait or launch a missile or something. You got them options, man. Once again, this requires pretty good timing, but it's well worth the safety when you get it down. Plus, your opponent will definitely think it was a fluke, until you punish them again. Then they'll just say you're a spammer or something. At the tail end of the mid-range neutral, your missiles are something you should be thinking about. I know that to many of you, this sounds like the dumbest thing I've said so far in this video. Maybe. Let's break this down one by one. The missiles have a slow startup, but that's okay because you're out of range of practically all normals with a faster startup. They can't jump at you because the missiles track, and will lead to a very hit-confirmable juggle. Your opponent can't really advance towards you normally because the missiles will hit their head. Shooting a few missiles will definitely get your opponent to do something rash, such as engage you in a projectile fight in the mid-range neutral. Which of course means if your opponent takes the bait, you can punish accordingly. Keep in mind that characters with fast advancing specials like Red Hood beat this, as well as slides or anything that can go under the missiles. Lastly, this is something that you shouldn't center your mid-range around because the more you use it, the better your opponent will be at defending against it. Use with moderation. Forward 2, from what I've seen so far, is perhaps the best mid-range normal in the game. On hit, you get a full combo. On block, you can go into your flight canceling meta, which is really good. If you just choose to simply finish the string, the whole thing is uninterruptible and safe, being -2, -3, and -2, with the final hit causing a stupid block stun that will mess with your opponent's retaliation timing. The range is great too. I mean, the whole string almost goes full screen. Definitely your key mid-range attack, and all around solid enough to use at close range too. Back 2-2 has okay range, starts low, then hits overhead. It's a bit on the slow side, but that's actually a good thing since it'll make the forward 3 mix-up a bit tougher to recognize. I mean, the mix-up is still reactable, but, well, anyway. Back 2-2 gives enough hit stun on both hits to combo into whatever you want. However, the main reason why you'd want to keep this string in mind is because it's a decent entry into your meta while having an okay-ish mix-up with forward 3. Speaking of forward 3, it has good range and it's +7 on block. Not that you'll be in range to capitalize off of it, but it's good to keep your opponent honest, plus it'll keep you in the ideal forward 2 range on block. 1-2-3-2 is your best close range attack. It's quick, very hit confirmable when used as a follow-up to a jump-in into a combo on hit or your flight meta on block, and ends with a safe low attack if you choose to finish the string. Seeing as it's 3 cancelable hits, you'd want to mix up which hit you choose to cancel to keep your opponent guessing. Please note that you can be interrupted before the final hit with quick attacks, however if you're the type to actually finish the string, you might as well go all the way and end with a meter-burned laser for maximum safety. Plus, that's a really ballsy move. Either your opponent had the plan to block 3 times, then mindlessly attack, or you're being predictable. Every hit is safe on block, well, except for the 3rd hit. Supergirl can super you, but that's it. Anyway, this string is great, and remember to be random about which attack you're going to cancel, as well as what you cancel into. And finally, we have down 1. I don't like down 1. Down 1 doesn't like me either. Therefore, it didn't make the cut. The reason being because it doesn't have the fear of leading to a full combo, and it doesn't transition into the meta well. If your opponent is tech crouching your standing 1, it's better to adjust your flight canceling meta to punish or use forward 2. Granted, it's not terrible to use down 1, but it's not optimal for Black Manta. In addition to squeezing more damage out of combos, his flight canceling can also be used to apply immense pressure in the close range. The first thing you need to know is the priority of attacks to flight cancel off of. Forward 2 and 1-2 are the best attacks that give you the most advantage on block, therefore these are your ideal attacks to begin your flight canceling pressure with since most characters can't interrupt you. Using these attacks is integral because you need your opponent to know they must respect your flight cancels. Please note that this is the hardest step because you can't buffer an attack after activating your flight, nor can you buffer your manual landing after the airborne attack. And to make matters worse, if you screw up the timing, you're just going to float there, leaving yourself wide open for an attack. It took me an hour or so in training mode till it started to become second nature, so hang in there. Until your opponent shows respect, your best follow-up after activating is jumping 2, then land and use 1-2-3 and see if your opponent got hit. 1-2-3 is safe on block and easily hit confirmable. Obviously on hit, combo accordingly. On block, you can either play it safe and use a meter burn laser, finish the string, or cancel into something. As mentioned earlier, forward 2 and 1-2 give you the most advantage on block. Standing 3 and back 2 are next, followed by forward 2-1 and back 2-2. With 1-2-3 being your least advantageous attack on block. So I'm sure you're thinking, what's the point of using the other attacks when forward 2 and 1-2 are the best? You're not going to know when your opponent is going to attack, and the fact that you can flight combo from standing 3 and both hits from back 2-2 make it worth using for hit confirmation reasons. And 1-2-3 is what you use when you want to slow down and see if your opponent got hit, since it's easiest to hit confirm from. By using other attacks to flight cancel from, your opponents won't know where the gap is. so they're just going to have to guess. Which is exactly what you want. Make it as hard as possible for your opponent to attempt an offense. When your opponent second guesses their action, you can get away with a lot more, such as canceling into a missile instead, which is at least +10 on block, allowing you to build more meter and keep the offense going. Shooting a missile in your opponent's face can only work if they don't know when it's their turn to attack. Be creative with what you do, and remember, if your opponent starts to interrupt you, use forward 2 and 1-2 more. 2 down 3 is an interesting alternative to 1-2-3. They're both used to slow down and see if your opponent got hit. 1-2-3 gives you more time to hit confirm, while 2 down 3 gives flight advantage on a blocked third hit, unlike 1-2-3. 2 down 3 on hit also stuns long enough to combo into a missile, which of course hit confirm it into a meter burn for a combo. The downside to 2 down 3, however, is that on hit, if you flight cancel, not only will you not be able to combo, but your opponent will stumble backwards out of your jumping 2 range, resulting in them having an obvious advantage, if not a punish against you. With other attacks, at worst, you'll just drop the combo, but still keep the pressure going. In general, you build meter pretty fast with Black Manta, and a lot of his combos don't require meters, so don't worry about using a few meter-burned lasers for chip and safety, as well as meter-burned back 3s to keep your opponent honest. Don't forget to grab your opponents too. The best time for this is when you manually land after an airborne attack. And remember, this flight canceling meta is not easy to perform. It will require a lot of practice just to get the timing of the initial airborne attack down, let alone properly mixing up your offense without hesitation. Most people are not willing to put in the practice, but it is Black Manta's most effective strategy. There are a few characters that can get out of this pressure with low-profile down 2s, such as the Flash and Catwoman. However, there's always generic options to punish attempts, as well as some hard reads to send the perfect message. I'm sure you noticed that most combos end with the air Harpoon, eh? Luckily, that puts you in the perfect position to pressure their wake up with 1-2-3. If your opponent wakes up with a special, the first hit will get them. If your opponent wakes up normally, the second hit will get them. And if your opponent delays their wake up, the third hit will connect. Of course, this doesn't help against good invulnerable wake ups, but there are ways around those. For those that are invulnerable up to the impact, jumping usually works in some way, but it might be better to back off and punish against some characters. If they're not invulnerable all the way to the impact, forward 2 snuffs their attempt. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video helps your Black Manta game. The next video will be on Raiden, and it should be out in a few days. Like 4, maybe 5.